Greetings, peoples of the interwebs. Irishman Jake here again with another episode of Comic Conversations. And this time, my guest is none other than Capo Jones, the master of list making, as I'm sure you are all familiar with his top 10 and just top countdown videos. So, how are you doing this evening?
Oh, I'm good, Jake. How's it going? How's the beard going?
What did you say, beer or beard?
Beard.
Beard. Beard's going pretty good. I'm actually considering getting it trimmed. Haven't decided yet, so feel free to weigh in the comment section below. Because oddly enough, people seem to be fascinated with my beard. Anytime I post like pictures, that seems to be the main point of interest for people. So
I think you got that Wolverine kind of mystique with it, not because how he known for his chops.
That's true. And again, that's kind of why I cosplay as Wolverine, because all I got to do is just pop on a leather jacket and some claws, and I'm good to go. Anyways, let's get into the real conversation here. So, well, I guess first off, before we get into like some of the basic questions, what made you decide to kind of because you're obviously like well known for your list making abilities. So what kind of gave you the idea to kind of make that like your staple for comics? I mean, like making lists of like top comic characters or top, whatever.
I think the list. I think when somebody ever does a countdown or something I've always noticed since I joined Amino, Comics Amino, is that when it comes to lists, they're always good water cooler talks. Like everybody wants to know who's in their top 5. It's like a question that always comes in my mind. So it was kind of like my way of easing into getting to know everybody.
Okay.
And it was just something just to spark. And then they grew from there to see, it was the influence from Watch Mojo and What Culture. I've always enjoyed them because the arguments in the comments were always hilarious. So it was just something like, let me start doing this.
That's actually a really good idea, because there have been a lot of times where I've watched videos on like Watch Mojo or What Culture where they do like their top videos on whatever, and sometimes like I'll kind of and honestly even some of your top blogs, I've read through some of them and I'm like, okay, I totally agree with that. But every now and then there's like some where I'm like, I don't know about that. But again, that's just kind of my personal tastes and preferences, as obviously it differs between people. Okay. I guess going into top things, what would be like some of your top comics? Like I guess some of the comics that like first got you into comics, and would those be on your list of top comics in general, whether it be a top 5, top 10, or whatever?
Well, definitely Giant Size X-Men, because according to my dad, that's how I learned to read when I was young. That's kind of like how I got introduced. It's kind of weird how I got introduced to comics, actually, because I got introduced to comics through the comic book movies, because I remember he had the VHS Batman, Batman with Michael Keaton.
Those are like days, man, VHS.
Right. You see, shows my age.
Yeah, for anyone who didn't grow up in like probably past 2000, you don't know what VHS are, and I don't know. Those are just the days, man. Or like whenever you'd rent like a movie from a Blockbuster, like you would always have to rewind those things. I don't know, just nostalgia, kids. For those of you who don't know what VHS are.
Very ancient. I mean, somebody should put those in a time capsule. But that's kind of. But he, because I think he told me, and I think it was like when I got like when I started remembering, I guess what was part of my childhood. He was like, yeah, you learn how to read through Giant Size X-Men, because
that's awesome.
I know as far as the comic books, the X-Men were like the main comic books I was paying attention to, because those are the only comics that this guy at this flea market I used to go to would sell. It was mainly X-Men, Wildcats, and I want to say Spawn when he got hot. So it was like those were like the 3 main comics I was paying attention to. As far as Superman and Batman, I was mostly keeping up with those guys through like the movies or cartoon shows.
Yeah. Which I think makes sense, just because Batman and Superman have kind of always been in like the cultural zeitgeist, either through the movies or the various TV shows. And so even myself, haven't really read a whole lot of Superman or Batman comics just because I've been so inundated with those characters through the various movies, TV shows, and stuff like that, to where I'm kind of like, I feel less compelled to read a Superman or Batman comic just because I'm already super familiar with the characters. Whereas there are other characters in Marvel or DC where I'm kind of like, I'm not familiar with that character. I'll check out that comic.
I agree. I definitely agree because it took me a while to I remember the first Batman comic that I actually read through, actually a storyline I paid attention to was Hush. Like when I first got back into comic books after taking a break from, because I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
It was like, that was like the comic book store near my home. He just here's Hush and pay attention to that. And I was like, oh, okay. And Superman, I think the only one that really grasps my attention at the time that is in my top 10 probably will be the Death and Return of Superman storylines. Because that was actually the first comic book storyline that I actually paid attention to because it was such a big thing. Like it was in video game books, it was on the news, so I got curious, like, Superman about to die, what's going on? It was like one of the things that you couldn't help but to pay attention to. But other than that, I guess it was because the era I grew up in when it came to the 90s, and that was kind of like the slow period for comic books. That's probably when I stopped paying attention. Like you, like I was already invested in Superman.
Yeah.
And the TV shows and the movies, it was like I didn't have a reason to look at the comic books until like maybe New 52 or Rebirth.
Yeah, that's honestly, I think when I started actually reading more Batman comics was New 52. Although Superman, it was actually Red Sun. Because for me, like Superman, I like the character, but I feel like to write good stories, it's hard to write really good, compelling stories for that character. So when I heard the premise of Red Sun, because my older brother had a copy of it, so I'd read like some of his comics, and so when he explained the premise to me, I was like, "What? Superman lands in Russia? That's awesome!" And I read it, and I was just like, "This is incredible." Even though, because it just shows that regardless of where Superman landed, so long as he had that like kind of humble rural upbringing, he was still the exact same character basically, with the same morals, same fundamentals and stuff like that. So I absolutely love Red Sun. That is actually my favorite Superman story. Maybe controversial opinion, not 100% sure, just because I don't know. But yeah, so like Superman, I like when kind of different iterations or different interpretations of that character, and maybe that's also one reason why I really like Man of Steel.
I agree, because I was going to say, like, that's one thing that I've always liked about when somebody do Elseworld stories, because a lot of Elseworld stories has kind of always been in my top 10. Like, when it comes to the case of Superman, Red Sun is a good one, because I like the concept. And then it just looks like him, it's just that Soviet symbol just looks funny on, because you're so used to the S.
Yeah.
And then whatever happened to the world, Man of Tomorrow, then you just have all these avenues that they went, that even though we know Superman is like super OP, it's kind of like there's other stories that play on other aspects about Superman that most people just thought was cut and dry. So I definitely agree on that, because Injustice was definitely a storyline that grabbed my attention. Was like, whoa, like Superman's kind of hardcore, but it's the Superman that everybody always wanted to see, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, because it is always one of those questions, and even Lex Luthor has pointed out in the comics, where it's kind of like, I mean, if Superman decides to like go rogue, we're powerless. Like, what can we do? And Injustice shows that. It's like he basically is kind of like, all right, you can either join me or stand against me, and we'll see where that goes. Usually it doesn't go too well. So yeah, I love the whole premise of like Superman, and again, even in Injustice, he's not evil. He kind of just wants order. And granted, he kind of controls people in a very kind of dictatorial fashion, which obviously is not good. But it's still kind of like I like the fact that kind of puts him more in like a gray area where you're like, okay, I totally understand because you lost Lois, the love of your life, and I understand where he's coming from, but you don't agree with it, but you're still kind of like, I mean, he's not evil. He just is going about it in the wrong way.
Exactly. Because the one thing that I think what most people, he already kind of won most people because he did the one thing that I guess the other guy didn't do, and that's kill Joker.
Yeah.
And I think that, and instead of everybody being shocked about it, it was kind of like a halfway cheer, like,
yeah,
see, Bruce, that's what you should have did. So
yeah, and it does kind of. I don't know, because, like, sometimes I do kind of think, well, if I had Superman's powers, like, in a way, like, again, I don't know if I would actually do this. I would hope not. But one part of me is like, I mean, all Superman would have to do is just, like, use one villain, like a well-known villain like the Joker, use them as an example, and be like, look, this is what happens when you do bad things. I will, like, punch a hole through your chest, or I'll, like, I-beam your face off or something. And basically he's like, no, I don't want to do this, but, you know, push comes to shove, I'll do it. Because it's kind of like, that's all you'd have to do, because you can nuke Superman. It's not going to kill him. It might hurt him a bit. It might weaken him a bit, but that's it. Because even Kryptonite isn't a one-hit KO unless you, like, hit him in, like, a vital, like, organ, like the heart, the brain, or something like that, but that's still really hard to do, so... Yeah, that's one thing that I thought was just, you know, again, really cool about that concept of injustice. And again, a very terrifying thought, too, honestly, because it's kind of like, yeah, we're powerless. Even the most powerful superheroes don't stand a chance against Superman, because he can literally tow planets, which is...
I think so. I agree. Yeah, that's funny, and it's funny you bring that up, because earlier today, Watch Mojo did a countdown of most powerful DC characters, and I was just thinking, like, and I was just waiting for them to put Superman on that list, and he didn't get on the list, and I was like,
really?
Oh, okay, it's interesting, because obviously the Presence was number one, but you had people like Dr. Manhattan, Mr. Mixopedaling, whose name is still hard to say.
Yeah, because it seems like anybody you ask, they have a different pronunciation, so...
Yeah, and it was just like, and then when you think about it, and my wife always had this argument because she kind of knows the aspect that she kind of studied it, and she was like, I heard that Superman does things halfway because he's scared if he goes full strength, he's gonna, like, it's a wrap. And I was thinking, like, yeah, so it's just, so it kind of makes me laugh when people have arguments like Batman can beat Superman, and I'm like, okay. Yeah.
It's like, maybe. Like, it's one of those things where, like, yeah, you could probably put the statistics in, like, analyze it, and Batman might win X amount of the time. But if you analyze everything, like, Superman is going to win a majority of the times, because he doesn't have to try. Like, he could just fly up to Batman, karate chop, dead. Fly up to Batman, throw him into the sun, dead. I-beam his face, like, because, again, Batman has to prepare, like, methodically, and, like, very precisely to where he could even kill Superman, or even have a chance of killing Superman. Where Superman can, like, no effort at all. But yeah, that's another thing, too, is, you know, a lot of people like that call it the age-old debate of, like, oh, who would win, Batman, Superman? It's like, Superman. Like, I like Batman better as a character, but Superman all the way.
And it's kind of wild, and that kind of speaks to Batman's mystique, because it's like you're out of all the people in comic books, they pick you as the one person the biggest argument in comic books is Batman or Superman. It's never it's never Superman versus Aquaman or Superman versus Darkseid. It's always who would win between Batman versus Superman, because I guess he's built that legacy where he's good. And even then with him, going back to the topic of like other stories like Dark Knight Metal, which unpopular opinion I wasn't a fan of, but the only thing that I did love was the Batman who laughs. And I was like, this guy looks freaking hardcore. And it just me thinking, like, if Batman was to go ballistic and have his ingenuity but be a little bit like Joker, that would be the Batman I picture. Like, one day I was thinking that, and I was like, this guy would probably this version of Batman will probably be the best version to go against Superman because he wouldn't hold back.
No.
Prep time, he probably wouldn't care about because he's like, okay, I just know how you think, so
Yeah.
I just play to your weaknesses. So, because it's like, even though Superman has limitations, Batman has limitations too. And Batman who laughs looks like, from what I've seen, looks like a guy who doesn't. So
Yeah.
it's just that funny comparison between the two that's gonna probably be there till we are till the end of time. So,
but also I think that it is a really cool debate just because they're kind of the polar opposite, where Superman is kind of the representation of like everything just and good in the world, and again the beacon of hope and light, whereas and again, oddly enough, an alien, and yet Batman is kind of the vigilante, dark and gritty, but he also is the more, again, he's human, but like it. I don't know. I always just kind of like the whole juxtaposition of the two, where completely different like kind of belief systems and like justice. They have the same in game, just different ways of going about it. And the fact that like Batman is, again, he's just a guy. Granted, he's a super rich guy who happens to have the technology to do all the things that he can do, but it's still the fact that he's just a human. So it is cool that even though he has all this technology and intelligence, he's still just a guy up against essentially a god, and there's still always that constant debate of like, well, yeah, Batman would still win, and, it's like, because he has a plan for everything. And again, that's a fair argument, but I would still counter with like, yeah, he has a plan for everything, but Superman doesn't need a plan, he just needs to fly up and throw him into the sun. Bam. He's won. And again, he can tow planets, people. He can tow planets, like nothing.
right,
So,
right.
until a character can tow planets, I think Superman's pretty much going to win a majority of the time, if you do some kind of mathematical equation for that. I myself am not intelligent enough to write that down, because math has never been my strong point, but I'm sure if someone did, trust me, Superman would win a majority of the time. So X-Men was kind of your jumping off point. What are some of your other go-to like comics where, like, if there's ever a lull where you're maybe not super active in reading comics, but there's always that one go-to comic series, whether it be Marvel, DC, Indie, where you're like, okay, I can always rely on this character, this storyline to always continue reading, even if like other stories aren't really capturing your attention all that much.
Man, I got quite a few. In the case of to be in Marvel, Civil War always grasped my concept because that was, I think it was around the Ultimate Era was when I first really got really hardcore. I think I was in like college, freshman of college when I got hardcore, and Civil War dominated my social life pretty much because I had the game. I think it was Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2.
Yeah.
That it was based off of. The Civil War was based off of, and I was like, was this for real? Because sometimes games will pull anything out of the hat and just say, okay, we're about to make a game out of it. But when I saw the story, I was like, oh, this is interesting because I think what made Civil War so good was the fact that it was like the first time where the superhero community was like that split down the middle.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody's ever done that before. So that was like one storyline that for some reason I just had to keep going back into. When it comes to DC, I'd say my top 3 comic books of all time is pretty much the new Teen Titans series. From beginning to probably the storyline when Raven breaks up the wedding of Dick Grayson and Starfire. Like, that's up from the beginning to that point was like, it's just that series. I was so engaged in it because it was the first time I ever read a Teen Titans comic involving that group, because the Teen Titans that I got into was Tim Drake, Connor Kent, the Wonder Girl, I think her name was Cassandra.
Yeah.
That group, that was the Teen Titans that I knew. So I didn't know like, oh, okay, Robin was part of this group. Who the heck is Starfire? Because my wife introduced me actually to Starfire when she told me about the cartoon.
Yeah.
And I'm there like, Starfire, Cyborg. Who are these people you naming
Yeah.
off? And I had to go back and look at it like, oh crap, like I'm missing out. So
Yeah.
that was one series. But the one series I say that I will always held dear to my heart is a series called Legendary by Dynamite Entertainment was published it. And it was like when I first got back after like some years away from comic books, and I asked for a good steampunk comic because that's like my thing. And the comic book guy was saying, hey Jay, have you heard of Legendary? And I'm like, huh? And he showed me a preview, and I'm like, okay, this is kind of like it grasped my attention because it was so out of nowhere, the team up, because you have Flash Gordon, Vampirella, Red Sonja, Zorro, the Green Hornet. I'm like, all these people who probably would never be caught within each other in a regular storyline just happen to be around each other in this book. And it was a good book that I honestly could compare to the setup of the Avengers movie, because it was just built because the series is pretty much a building up to the last two issues where they're now officially a team, and now they're gonna okay, we're a team, y'all better run. And I think that's what made that series so good, because everything was a build up to that moment. And I think that's why Old Man Logan also holds it dear to my heart too, because I didn't like it at first until I gave it a chance, and that's pretty much what it was a build up to him finally snapping an iconic scene of him popping his claws out for the first time. Yeah. And that's what Legendary was. It was just like, that's the equivalent of the claws popping out. Like, okay, we're together. You messed with us for long enough, and we're about to hit you hard.
And I think that's another thing is, and again, like I think to a lot of people who maybe aren't as familiar with like some of the independent like comic labels, it's like, yeah, there are tons of like indie characters who have teamed up before in the comics, and they kind of do. Granted, it's not something that happens frequently, like the Avengers or Justice League or anything like that in Marvel or DC. But that's also kind of what I like about it, though, is they use it very sparingly. Like, every now and then there will be, like, a team-up of, like, Red Sonja and, like, some of these other characters. And, whereas I feel like, and not necessarily a knock towards Marvel or DC, but, obviously, like, there's always an ongoing Avengers or Justice League series or, like, constant crossovers, which is fine every now and then. Like, because obviously they're in the same universe, I don't mind when they... like if Flash pops into like a Green Lantern comic or something like that, it's like, oh hey man, they like wait for something. It's like, yeah, okay, makes sense. But a lot of times, and again, this is mostly towards Marvel. So I feel like after Secret Wars, it was just like this constant like, hey, this character and this character, they know each other, they're friends, and just everyone was crossing over with each other, and that got a little annoying just because it's like, if I'm reading like a Thor comic, I'm like, all right, I just want to see Thor do his thing. I don't necessarily need to see Iron Man or all these other characters pop in and kind of like, hey man, do you need help? Do you want me to help you fight this guy? It's like, he's got it. He's Thor. He's the God of Thunder.
I agree. Yeah, definitely.
So,
because I was gonna say, because I think that's what you kind of hit it on the head. Like the indies, when they do crossovers, it seems like they have more weight, and it's really good at world building. Like the Valiant universe is a very good example, because some of those encounters are just happen to be like just somebody bump, like Exo Manowar just happened to bump into Ninjak, and it's like, oh, how you doing? Well, we're going the same way. IDW and Dynamite have been doing a great job with that, because Hack Slash and Vampirella have been teaming up lately a lot. I get, because that was because the first crossover, in my opinion, was great. And then they piggybacked off of it when they did Hack Slash Resurrection, and they brought Vampirella in it. Yeah. And it just seems like the weight, because another story that always was a good story, Swords of Sorrow by Dynamite. And it was just Vampirella meets Red Sonja and Deja Thoris and Jennifer Blood, a.k.a., for those that don't know, is pretty much the independent female version of The Punisher. Yeah. So, and it just so happens that in this story was written like maybe like 6 years ago, but they're just now recognizing it as part of like it was canon, because in the crossover of Tarzan and Sonya, which Tarzan's wife Jane was part of the Sword of Sorrow, it was brought up. So it's kind of, for any hardcore reader, it's kind of like that. Oh wait, they're recognizing a past story. Like it's like that crossover. It's a good world building moment, and I think that's something that I've always liked about the indies, because they were very good at crossover events where it seemed to have more weight, as opposed to it being the norm in say like DC, sort of like Superman and Wonder Woman. Okay, we know, they bump into each other a lot in the Justice League comic, and here they are with their own separate comic, which is fine on the surface, but you kind of seen it before in maybe like a one shot or an annual or something like that.
Also, it's just that, like, again, I feel like in the independent comics, since they do team up so rarely, it takes more effort for the writers of all the different characters. So, like, I feel like it's more of a like the writers for like Red Sonja, Vampirella, or whoever's writing the characters at the time, kind of all have to go like, okay, so here's kind of what the direction I've been taking this character in. How do we find the best way to have these characters meet up, make it feel natural, and make it work? And again, like, this is part of the reason why I haven't been reading Marvel a whole lot, is I just feel like every 2 weeks there's like a big event or some kind of big crossover. And again, it's like, I understand that like all these characters pretty much live in the same city. And granted, New York's a big city, but with superheroes, I imagine you're still running into each other fairly regularly, but it's still the fact that, like, I don't need to see these characters all popping up in, like, each other's comics. Whereas that's one thing that I liked about Red Sonja. Red Sonja takes place in the same universe as Conan the Barbarian.
Right.
But, like, in all the comics that I've read on both characters, there might be like a casual mention of each other, but they're never like, it's not this constant thing where they're constantly like going into like an inn. They're like, oh hey, what adventure did you just get finished with, Conan? So like, again, and it's because again it's a big world that they live in both in both universes, even though they're owned by two different studios or publishers now. But again, they still take place in the same universe and still cross over every now and then. But it's still the fact that, like, when they do cross over for like a 6-issue miniseries or something, it's really cool because you're kind of like, oh, awesome! I get to see Red Sonja and Conan team up again. They haven't done this in like 10 years or something. Whereas in like Marvel or DC, you get these team up things, which again, fine every now and then. But it's like, I don't know. It's not as special when you see Spider-Man and Punisher team up to take down the Kingpin or something. So you're kind of like, yeah, okay, this is kind of cool. And yeah, they kind of butt heads on like their different methods of fighting crime, but I've seen this before multiple times. And right. I guess the argument could be said that, like, yeah, I've seen Red Sonja and Conan team up before. But since it's used less, since it happens less, it still has that kind of magic moment where I'm like, yes, they're teaming up together. How are they going to defeat this evil wizard this time, or this giant dragon, or whatever?
Right, exactly. Because one thing, and this is one of my favorite crossovers that Marvel did during this whole thing, which is kind of a rare nowadays, is when All New Wolverine came out. I think it was all number 4. And Squirrel Girl pops up, and it's like the most, and it's probably one of my favorite issues of All New Wolverine, because it was like the most random team up, and Squirrel Girl is just fangirling over Laura, and it's like the funniest thing ever. It was probably like, who would think Squirrel Girl would be teaming up with X-23 of all people?
Yeah, I actually like that parody.
Because they're so separate from each other, but here they are. She's kind of it's one line where she's kind of giving them a theme song, but it sounds so like Spider-Man, and it's like they go on these random, and it's like this random adventure. This is like, Squirrel Girl, what are you doing here? And she brings her a Wolverine, and I think that's how their pet Wolverine got introduced, because Squirrel Girl just randomly dropped it off at the apartment saying, can you communicate with this person? And X-23 is like, I can't speak to Wolverines, and it's like, well, oh, okay, and it's like this is like just that, like it's like encounters like that always was like, okay, this is funny because never in a million years where somebody will pull this off.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of the crossovers that I think that are actually treated good in Marvel are I guess the ones involving Daredevil, because you know, the chances of him like bumping into She-Hulk, which considering their profession should be on a regular because they're both lawyers, it's always rare that they bump into each other. Like I think they only bumped into each other this whole time, like maybe like once. And I think All New, All Different kicked off like 2015 or something like that, and they only crossed each other once, and that was just when she was going through her I guess post-traumatic stress from Civil War II. And I was like, see, stuff like that, it was just, and it wasn't even a whole issue, it was just like 3 pages and that was it. And I was like, stuff like that, it's like, yeah, build up, leave us one more, but don't overdo it. And I think that's what Marvel sometimes fail to realize. I mean, they do good in some aspects, but it's like some crossover. We should be left wanting that crossover. Or that's kind of how fan fictions be built up. It's like, oh, okay, let's piggyback off that and go to this website and see what else they can get into.
Well, I feel like if Daredevil and She-Hulk are going to team up, it's like they don't even necessarily have to be in costume. I just want to see like a like courtroom drama with like all the, you know, legal jargon and talk, filibuster, all that stuff for those two, like whether they're on the same team or maybe even representing 2 different clients. I want those two to be like
better one.
And granted, this would probably sell terribly because I can't imagine a whole lot of people are like, yes, I want a courtroom drama with Daredevil and She-Hulk, not in costume, just as their characters, just filibustering in the courtroom, trying to defend their client. And it doesn't even have to be anything major, like one of them was a bank robber. It could be something like, yeah, this guy owes me money, and they're just debating over that. I don't think anybody wants to see that, but like something, it would be different. Or see like weird team ups. Like again, if they're gonna do like these kind of weird team ups, do something like Howard the Duck and Punisher. That would be a team up I would see, because how do those two even like work together? I would be down for seeing that. Like if that comes out next week, I'm gonna go to a comic shop and buy that team up of Punisher and Howard the Duck, because one, Punisher is one of my favorite Marvel characters, and Howard the Duck is just an odd person to pair, or humanoid duck, whatever whatever you want to call him. That's just an odd pairing, so it's kind of like
something.
Yeah, so it's like, all right, I'll read that. How's that gonna work? Is Punisher just gonna be like blowing people's heads off, and Howard the Duck just gonna be sitting there like, what do I do?
Right. I think that's, and it's funny. That's why I kind of liked the Lockjaw comic, because it was like it just opened up the door for like team ups that might happen. Like Spider-Ham just happened to come out of nowhere, and it's been a while since we've seen him or it. So it was like Spider-Ham and Lockjaw, like it left me scratching my head like, how that's gonna work. And then like Howard the Duck, that would be a good team up, because I think Spider-Ham will probably try to annoy Howard the Duck, because if Spider-Ham would have any sense of Peter Parker's wisecracks or wisecracks, in Howard the Duck's case, it is just be so entertaining. And I think that's what, that would be something that they wouldn't have to try hard. The premise kind of writes itself.
Yeah. And again, these don't have to be like ongoing series. These can just be like 6-issue miniseries that they can release every now and then. And again, these will be like, again, since they're kind of like one-off miniseries, they don't really have to have like some kind of big overarching storyline. It's just kind of like, yeah, here's like a very kind of serialized adventures of Howard the Duck and Spider-Ham. A combination no one expected, no one even wanted, but you're gonna read it. Because again, those of you who are listening, like if you saw that in the comic book shop, you can be like, I've got an extra like $5 to spend on this comic. Sure, I'll give it a go. Worst case scenario, I don't like it. But then probably because it is such an odd combination, you're like, I want to read more, and I don't know why. Because, again, it's not going to be like this big world-ending thread. It's just going to be like a fun kind of series where you're like, where's this going? Okay, I'm going to give the next issue a go, because I'm curious to see where this story is going with these two characters. So yeah, Marvel.
And I think that's another thing too, because it's definitely one of those comics that have you give you a big WTF face, because you're gonna sit there like, what is these two doing together? Because I think that's what I felt when I saw Thor Frog or Throg as part of the Pet Avengers, and I just stopped and looked like, out of all, like what? Like, but I don't know why I'm looking at this, but I'm sure gonna read it because I just want to see how this turns out.
And honestly, I think that's one thing that the Marvel movies have been doing well too, is like bringing in these deep cut characters. So I know, like when Guardians of the Galaxy 2 was first, like it was before the movie came out. I think it was when it was still in development, and I'd heard that James Gunn was adding Ego the Living Planet. So my first thought was, what? No, that's weird. But then immediately after that, I'm kind of like, no, yes, bring on the weird. People, like non-comic readers, need to see the weirdness of Marvel Comics and see a sentient planet. And honestly, I'm going to be honest, I was a little disappointed we saw Ego more as Kurt Russell, although I love me some Kurt Russell. You put him in any movie, and he's great. But I wanted to see more of like the actual bearded planet talking, having a conversation. But I still love the fact that, like, or even Howard the Duck. We've seen Howard the Duck in the MCU. So it's like, I love the fact that they're bringing these deep-cut characters, or, like, these weird, trippy things from, like, the 60s and 70s. They're like, okay, we're at this point. We can bring in characters like Howard the Duck and Ego the Living Planet. And the general audience is like, yeah, okay, talking duck man, talking planet, cool, okay.
And I think, didn't he have one of the ending credit scene was him just sitting there licking an ice cream or something like that. Like, it was just like in the first movie, it was just like I just happened to see it and I'm like, is that Howard the Duck sitting there of all things? Like, what is he doing there? Yeah. But I agree, like the obscure characters, that's something that Marvel has done a great job. Like you brought out characters that nobody would think that would be in a comic book movie, like Scott Lang, Ego.
Yeah, no. Like, never in a million years was I like, yeah, Marvel's definitely going to do a Doctor Strange movie or Ant-Man. And then, sure enough, like, at the point where I'm like, you know, Marvel, they're proving themselves, but I don't think we're ever going to see a Doctor Strange movie. And me being the big Doctor Strange fan, as soon as they announced Doctor Strange, I was like, oh my god, yes, please.
Right. That's what I was thinking, like, oh, y'all actually going to do it.
Yeah.
And then have people thinking, like, then that's when the rumor mill starts spinning, because it's like, okay, who's gonna play him?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, for some reason everybody had oh my god, Andy Serkis playing Doctor Strange. I'm like, okay, he's one of the greatest, but yeah, let's like pump our brakes. But that's how things work, because it's like that you get hyped just by certain characters that were, I guess, fan favorites. Mm-hmm. Got some type of fan base. And when you bring them out, when you announce it, it's like, oh, okay. Yeah. Like Captain Marvel. Like, no one in a million years thought we'd see Carol Danvers in the MCU, because she wasn't part of it in the first few phases and whatnot. So that's something that definitely, it had me hyped, because I'm like, oh, okay, Carol's about to step up. Mm-hmm. Where the heck you been at?
Which, okay, speaking of, what did you think about the Captain Marvel trailer?
I thought it was great. The thing I've always loved Carol Danvers. Mm-hmm. She's always been one of my favorite female Marvel characters. She's not in my top 10 as far as overall, but she's definitely up there, because I loved her as Miss Marvel. Besides that one storyline that, if anybody follows me on Amino, they know I butchered it enough. I'm gonna just give you a hint. His name is Marcus, but Carol Danvers has always been somebody I've always had a soft spot for, because it's like the way I've always saw her is like their answer to Wonder Woman. Yeah. As far as like female characters, and when I saw the trailer, I'm like, okay, like I'm still trying to warm up to her as Captain Marvel, but I'm at the point where it made it believable. And then the fact that they're introducing the Skrulls, and it allowed. The only gripe I had with it was the casting of Marvel, because I don't know. I love Jude Law, but I felt like Marvel. I felt like Marvel's. I hope his role is much more big, because he's a big part of the development of Carol Danvers as Captain Marvel. And so that's the one thing that I'm kind of holding my breath on. I think I know she's. I mean, I believe Brie is going to do. Real good.
I mean, Brie Larson is a great actress, so I think she'll be perfectly fine as Captain Marvel. Of course, me personally, I wasn't super crazy about the trailer. Like, not that it was bad by any means, but I just felt like it didn't really get me like super excited. Like, it kind of felt like a very just typical superhero trailer movie. Or trailer.
I think that's what a lot of people was putting teaser, because that's all it was. Because I think the trailer is like a minute.
And that 20. Is fair, like, because it was just a teaser. So I think it's trying to get the non-comic readers or people who are familiar with the character. And honestly, I'm not super familiar with the character, but like I think it's just mostly meant for like the non-comic readers to be like, hey, there's a new Marvel movie coming out. You're gonna spend your money to go see this because I mean, come on. You've already seen 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies. You've seen Infinity War, the culmination of like every comic book reader's like fantasies. Seeing that happen, so you're gonna spend more money. So like that, I do think that's fair, because I actually had a conversation with Sir Stans-A-Lot actually on Facebook earlier. I think it was yesterday actually. It was kind of the same thing where he posted a link. He was like, "I'm super excited," and I was like, maybe controversial opinion, wasn't super crazy about it. But again, that could also be the fact that 1, it was a teaser. 2, I'm not super familiar with the character of Captain Marvel. I've never read any of her comics. I only know kind of like the very base level. Right. So again, but
I think she's only been like shining through in like crossovers, and I think that's why I made that one countdown characters who really only shine in crossover, because she's like the first person I thought about. Because when it comes to comic books, it's really hard to find a Miss Marvel pure, just her on her own story. And I think that's why her fan base isn't as big as I guess it should be, because when you see her, she's either part of the Avengers or she just happened to just pop up and say hi, like in Civil War. She just happened to be there in both of them. And I guess some in the Kree Skrull War, I think she was there like a flash in the pan and just be like, okay, I'm going, like, storylines like that. But I think hardcore fans, because I don't know if the rumor is true, but I know this next few phases, the next big event, like the next big event that this next generation is leading up to, is Secret Invasion. Yeah. So I think that's what got me hyped, as far as like, okay, the Skrull is about to be introduced. Now the Secret Invasion chapter of the MCU is about to kick off, and I think that's what a lot of people are getting hyped for, because she's her link to the Kree, and we all know the Kree's issue with the Skrulls. Yeah. It's like, okay, like this. I think that's what it's gonna be about. And what I feel like, and I think the one thing that I kind of felt like you with the trailer is, and it's maybe a little deceptive, but it seemed like how they're gonna do her origin story, because the way it looked like, they was doing the edits, it was like, they trying to say she's from outer space, because she is a good old fashioned American girl to the core.
But that you do bring up a good point though with the Skrulls though, is because again, like, comic readers were familiar with Skrulls. So like especially that scene where like she's on I think it's a bus and she punches that old lady. Yeah. So imagine people who don't know anything about Skrulls, anything about comics, were probably like, why'd she punch an old lady? I thought she's supposed to be a hero. So it's like,
I think I saw like 80 memes about that. Like, next day, and it was just like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. So but at the same time, I like the fact that we're at this point in Marvel to where they can show a trailer with the main character, her debut film, punching an old lady, and they're like, people will figure it out, or they'll just ask their like comic book nerd friend and be like, why is she punching an old lady? And we can be like, oh, they're a Skrull. I'll explain what Skrulls are, because I imagine you don't know what Skrulls are. So I like the fact that, again, we're at this point in the Marvel Universe where we have characters like Ego the Living Planet, Scott Lang Ant-Man, Captain Marvel punching old ladies who are Skrulls, and we're just kind of like, yeah, okay. Like, no one's batting an eye. Most people's favorite character are like, yeah, I like Groot, the talking tree that says all of like 4 words.
Right.
So yeah, it's like kind of this golden age of like comic book nerdy greatness to where people finally understand how we felt for like all these decades reading comic books or like being into like sci-fi and fantasy. People are like, oh yeah, I get it now. Groot, I love that guy.
Right. But never in a million years will Groot ever. I think that, and that's one thing that Guardians of the Galaxy did do is make characters who probably would never be popular like Groot.
Mm-hmm.
Groot probably developed a following, but not as soon as he did with, I guess, Vin Diesel's portrayal of the character. Or I think the only two that probably would have got over without the help of the movies was Star-Lord and Gamora.
And even those two, I feel like, would still be... Like, if you had asked, like, maybe 1 out of every 10, 15, like, people, maybe 1 would know who Star-Lord and Gamora were. Because, honestly, I didn't know who the Guardians of the Galaxy were. Not a single character.
Me neither. Because I think my wife was telling me, it was like, I'm going to see Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, who are they?
Yeah.
She's like, they from Marvel. I thought you knew that. I read Marvel. Doesn't mean I know everybody.
Yeah.
You're going to have to educate me on this one.
Yeah.
So... I think that's why I was so successful, because it was it was a bunch of characters that almost no one knew about. So it allowed for everybody to go in there with an open mind.
Yeah.
And because you probably can ask, I say like 40% people probably were hardcore Guardians of the Galaxy fans and was just going in there like, oh yeah, this person.
Yeah.
I think everybody in the world was like, okay, who are these people?
Yeah.
And because I think the only person that they recognized in that movie was, I think, Ronan the Accuser.
Yeah. And there's probably like that one guy where when they first announced Guardians of the Galaxy, they're like, finally, you're just now getting to Guardians of the Galaxy?
Right.
Whereas most people were either like, who? Or they're kind of like, I've heard the name, but I don't know anything past that. And again, more credit to Marvel, because they had built themselves up to that point. They're kind of like, okay, we need to introduce the audience to the cosmic realm. What's the best way to do that? And then I guess James Gunn was like, Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're like, this is a risk, but hey, let's go with it. And then that movie made, I think, like $700 million, like over $700 million, the first one. So imagine even the people at Marvel were like, oh wow, we did a movie about complete unknowns, and it made $700 million? Okay, we can do anything now. We can make a movie about ice cream. That random X-Men character who can turn into ice cream.
Right.
And I honestly believe if they made a movie about ice cream, people would go see it. Just slap the Marvel label on there, and people are like, what does this guy do? He turns into ice cream. That's dumb. But okay, I'll go see it.
If they got the right elements, I'll go see it.
Yeah.
They'll really have a up and take my money moment right at the gate.
Yeah. And again, at this point, Marvel can cast whoever they want. They could get someone like Matthew McConaughey. It's like, hey man, do you want to play a mutant that turns into ice cream? He'd be like, all right. And then bam, we got Matthew McConaughey's ice cream.
Right. And it's funny, like, with you saying that, it's like, one thing that I've always wondered, like, okay, how is Marvel pulling off these amazing casting jobs, but when it comes to DC, you got to kind of have this fight with it, because it's like, you kind of got to stay in development.
Yeah.
I guess development hell because look how long it's taking to, I guess, cast another Batman.
Yeah.
Because Ben Affleck, it's kind of like hard, because it's like, you shouldn't be that hard to replace. Granted, Ben Affleck's great, but...
Oh, yeah. I was actually surprised at how much I liked him.
Like, the one thing that's got me curious is how they're going to replace Henry Cavill, because that one shocked me. I'm kind of mad about it, actually.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's like, he's been there since the beginning. He started the DCEU. Like, why have we not seen a Man of Steel 2? Right. Or... Of course, also to be fair, it's kind of like Marvel have basically snatched up all the best actors, or well-known actors for the most part, so it's kind of like Warner Brothers kind of has to rely on, like, sort-of known people to, like, unknown. I'd never heard of Ezra Miller or Ray Fisher before they cast him as Flash and Cyborg. Granted, I really like Ray Fisher as Cyborg. Not a huge fan of Ezra Miller as Flash, but, that I'm not going to judge him so much, because I think that could have easily been the writing for Justice League.
I think it's just Grant Gustin loyalists. We just love Grant because he's been Flash so long, and we just like. I guess this, from my point of view, that's how I feel because it's like, okay, like this is the Flash that we know. Granted, you're a great Flash but I think the one thing with Ezra is we would have loved him if he was Wally West because that was the image that came off. That's what came off with us because like if that was Wally, we'd be happy because that's exactly how Wally acts.
Yeah.
He's quirky, but he's also like very just awkward, but he's funny. And Barry Allen's like he has his moments, but I think as far as I guess the comic relief, Wally got better timing. Yeah. There's been a bunch of times in the new Teen Titans comics where he just like the one scene is where they all had to pull, and it's just a panel by panel shot of him jumping over, like heads up, look out.
Yeah.
He jumped over a bush. Each panel was him stripping off some clothes, getting ready to get in the pool. I'm like, who the heck does that? Like, but that's just how Wally is, though, and I think that's why I love Wally so much. So Ezra Miller being the Flash and Ray Fisher being Cyborg were great. I think also when it comes to casting, I think it's better that they cast it. I guess I've always been a fan of, I guess, no name or almost because it's like I think I mentioned this too in a countdown too. Like the passion is somewhat there. Like they got a chip on their shoulder. So I'm pretty sure Chris Evans was like that too when he got cast as Q because he's like, okay, I'm known, but I'm not that known. Like Robert Downey Jr. level known. So it's like, okay, let me put all my effort into this. Chadwick Boseman as well. Like, okay, I'll play Black Panther before, but this is where I turn it up. So, when the case of DC, which is why I'm hoping that Titans succeed, and whenever they do the Birds of Prey series, they succeed because I'm rooting for all of them because I know they're hungry and I know they probably want to shake that stigma of DC movies or TV shows that's not part of the Arrowverse. Doing that or not an animated movie because everybody knows DC pretty much rules the animated comic book movie.
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And even their animated shows, like Batman the animated series holds up perfectly to this day. And
definitely. I think I was watching it the other day.
and again, that's like because that's going to be on their streaming service. And I know, like, as soon as they announce it's like, hey, guys, do you remember Batman the Animated Series? Not only is it going to be released on Blu-ray, it's going to be on our streaming service. I guarantee a lot of people are going to sign up for the DC streaming service just for Batman the Animated Series. Everything else is just icing on the cake. But Batman the Animated Series, because that's my Batman. That is my Joker, is Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill's Batman and Joker. Those are my two favorites. Don't get me wrong, Heath Ledger's great, Christian Bale's great. I like Ben Affleck as Batman, but those are my two Jokers. My Joker and Batman. And anyone else, like live action or regardless, those are the ones I compare to. I'm like, yeah, they're good, but they're no Kevin Conroy. They're no Mark Hamill, because Batman the Animated Series just had that big of an impact on me. Same thing with like the '90s animated X-Men and Spider-Man shows. Those are, I would argue, those are the three things that got me into the whole comic book world. And I mean, obviously there are like some of the movies, which for those of you kids who again grew up in like the early '90s or late '80s, it was basically just a few Superman movies and Batman, and that was about it. We only got superhero movies every like 10 years. It seemed like now we get like 6 at least every year. But yeah, so like back in the day, the 90s, golden age of TV shows, in my personal opinion, especially cartoon shows.
Absolutely.
But Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man, and X-Men, I think revolutionized the whole comic book world. Because I remember when I watched the animated series of X-Men, and when X-Men United came out, the second one. For those of you who remember, at the very end, as it's panning out of that lake, we see kind of like this winged figure coming out of the lake. And I distinctly remember me and my older brother were in the theater. We were like, oh my god, it's Phoenix! You're going to do Dark Phoenix Saga in the third X-Men movie.
Right,
and
yeah.
We were super excited, and that movie didn't deliver. But I just remember, because we had watched the show, and the show was pretty faithful to the comics at the time. Same thing with the Spider-Man show. I just remember like we were super excited about like every new episode of Spider-Man or X-Men or Batman. And so that was kind of like my introduction to the comic book world and comic book characters, because I remember Punisher and Doctor Strange, who are two of my favorite Marvel characters. They're only in like 1-2 episodes of Spider-Man the Animated Series, but I just remember that like immediately I gravitated to those characters. I'm like, I like that Doctor Strange guy. I like that Punisher guy. They don't live by the rules, and I dig it. And then
Right, and that's one thing that I felt like those TV shows did so well, because, and that's when crossovers had so much weight, because you saw, I think those 4 shows, I guess, the Batman the Animated Series, Spider-Man, X-Men, and then I guess you could throw Fantastic Four, the one that came after.
It was
with the
on for
Power
about a
Hour.
season. Yeah.
Yeah, they were so good at world building, because you saw the Punisher. I'm like, oh my god, they put him on the TV show. You know, you'd start jumping out, like almost out of your skin, because you see a character that don't have their own show in the show, and it's like, oh my god, they popped up. I remember they did that one crossover episode with Spider-Man and the X-Men.
Yes.
Like the two most popular, probably two of the most popular cartoon shows, and they're about to share a show together, and it was such a big deal, because, and I was like you, I didn't know much about, I guess, they was all in the same universe, so it's like, oh my god, like, you know, who booked this? Who wrote this? Because keep doing it, doing it, because that's something that nobody ever really tried to explore. Was like, what is like a big what if, right? For somebody that don't know anything about comics, it was a great what if. Like, what if these two just have to bump into each other and we got it? And it was a good storyline. The Fantastic Four, like, it just so happens, like, what if Namor pops up, just like the storyline, and they did a good job. And I think that's what was another thing too they did great on the TV show, was they stayed faithful to, I guess, the storyline they were doing, like the Dark Phoenix saga. And even if they missed a few things, we kind of forgave them, because it was like, we kind of can look past that, because we know Dark Phoenix kind of involved more than just the X-Men, because the Avengers got involved a little bit, but we get it. You don't want to you got like 30 minutes to do an episode, or it was like a 5-part series, but you can only do so much.
Yeah.
So it was kind of good on that part.
Yeah, or even because I remember that's kind of where I got like the basic gist of a lot of Marvel and DC characters, is watching either Spider-Man, X-Men, or Batman.
Right.
Because I remember, I forget when it was, but it seemed like when they did, like when they first announced Iron Man, because again, my only introduction to Iron Man was he appeared in a couple episodes of Spider-Man. He had his own show for a little bit around that same time with Fantastic Four, and I think Hulk had his own show for a little bit as well. So I watched all those shows. So I had like the kind of basic gist, but I just remember that like Iron Man at that time, he was kind of like a B-level superhero in Marvel. So when I first heard that Marvel, like the MCU, was starting off with Iron Man, I was like, huh, interesting. I was like, I mean, I like to think I'm fairly nerdy, but Iron Man, really? And then sure enough, that worked out perfectly, to have Robert Downey Jr., who just nailed the performance, but to also have Iron Man start off the MCU and then build their way up to the Avengers. It was brilliant, because again, never in a million years did I think they would make an Iron Man movie, let alone an Avengers movie, or anything we've gotten since. And I'll give DC credit too. Like, even though some of their movies haven't turned out that great, the fact that they even started off with Suicide Squad as I think their 3rd movie in their franchise, their extended universe, I'm like, that's impressive that they took a risk on because really the only well-known characters to most people would be Joker and Harley Quinn. Everyone else was kind of like, Crocodile Man, guy who shoots fire. No one knew who those characters were. So even though Suicide Squad wasn't the best movie, it's like, I'll give Warner Brothers credit where credit is due. The fact that they were like, all right, I believe in this vision, let's do Suicide Squad as our 3rd movie in this DCEU.
Yeah, because they was riding with what's hot, which
Yeah.
I agree. Because everybody knows, as far as Suicide Squad, they're like the premier. They're at this point, they're kind of now I say the third, fourth best team, most recognizable team behind Justice League, Avengers, and Defenders.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and the Guardians of the Galaxy too. So those Suicide Squad in there, it was kind of like a big deal because they're like, okay, we're getting Harley Quinn, we're getting the Joker. But I think the thing was the building the team up was probably, if I was to pick anything, the building of the team up, because I'm pretty sure people know who Deadshot was. Even though I've always called him, even though he came out first, I've always called him Discount Deathstroke because that's who he reminded me of so much. But it was like, okay, we got Deadshot, because if you, for fans, we all know Assault on Arkham. So that's what we went off of when it came to the movie. So it's like, okay, they're bringing these guys out. Captain Boomerang, obscure, but it was somebody that we can warm up to. Because
that's another thing. We have Captain Boomerang, live action, not only in the Flash TV show, but in a full-length feature film. We've got a character as ridiculous as Captain Boomerang, and yet he was one of my favorite characters in Suicide Squad, because I'm like, did he do a whole lot? No. But the fact that they've got Captain Boomerang in a live-action movie, I'm like, hell yes. Give me more of this, please.
Right, and I think that was what, and I applaud them every bit of the way for trying to bring those type of characters up. Like, I would have never thought I liked Diablo, because I was like, okay, man, this guy's being, okay. And then halfway to the movie, I'm like, okay, you're being a little interesting.
Yeah.
And Amanda Waller, I didn't have much to go on her because I didn't know who she was. So I'm like, and I've always been a fan of Viola Davis, so I knew she was going to kill that role. So I was just thinking like, okay, she's not bad at all. So it kind of had me wanting like, okay, I want to see more of this. Maybe they didn't get a fair shake, and you know, if you kind of know the story, there was some conflicts and stuff like that. It's kind of like, you kind of can look past that, like, okay, it's good that they did what they could with all they had. So I usually do that with a lot of movies. I give them the benefit of the doubt. I think that's why I love Justice League so much, because it's so easy to attack that movie when you don't know full length what it's been through, but the execution was great for what it was. And I've always been, because they were like, they messed up. I'm like, yeah, but there's only really so many. Not every movie's perfect. Yeah. And I've always said, you know, I'm glad they kind of hitting the reset button, but I still want them to still keep that same, like, gambling nature. And I think that's why I like the fact that, okay, keep coming with the Birds of Prey, characters or teams we really don't know anything about, but people will probably get hyped if you mention their name, like Huntress. Like, you'll probably find that one person that's probably going to jump over everybody's shoulders like, Huntress is in the movie. Like, because you know, that's a hardcore Huntress fan. And
I'm probably one of the few people who is excited about an Aquaman movie, because Aquaman for the longest time was kind of a joke. But I've always been a fan of Aquaman since Justice League Unlimited. Like when he had the hook hand and like the glorious beard. Oh yeah. I was kind of like,
that's how I got introduced to that Aquaman too.
and like, even though Jason Momoa isn't like the comic book accurate version, I'm kind of like, Jason Momoa's a cool guy. Like, he seems like a cool dude where you could just walk up to him and be like, hey man, you want a beer? He'd be like, yeah, let's go to the nearest pub and have a couple drinks. But again, he also resembles that, 'cause I think it was, who was it? Not Alan Moore, who created that kind of version of Aquaman in the 90s.
I think it was during, because I think it was when he, because I think it started with that storyline when I think it was Black Manta that killed his son, and he put his hand in the water and piranhas ate it and stuff like that.
Kind of weird.
Really crazy.
I like the way they did it in Justice League Unlimited more, where he had to cut his hand off to save his son rather than like dip his hand in piranha. Anyways, because again, 90s were a weird time for comics, kids.
Right.
But like when Jason Momoa was cast, I know some people are kind of like, hey, he's not my Aquaman, and I'm like, okay, you also have to consider that Aquaman has kind of been a joke for like decades. So casting someone like Jason Momoa, people are like, oh, okay, that's an interesting choice. I'm interested now. Now again, Aquaman could still.
Then in the same breath, they had to look at their girlfriend to see if they were drooling. Because
yeah. So
honestly, when I first saw it, I looked at my wife and was like, "Go ahead, smile."
Yeah.
Because I know you love Jason Momoa.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe by the time I get done watching Aquaman later this year, I might question my own sexuality. Who knows?
Right.
You know, maybe if I see him underwater, like with his hair and glorious beard flowing, I'm like, okay, I'm all for this. Or it could turn out to be bad. I don't know. But so far, I've not heard anything bad about Aquaman, so I'm looking forward to it. And again, he is a great character that I hope that like this movie finally shows the general audience and even comic book readers who still to this day are kind of like, nah, Aquaman's lame. It's like, no, if you read the comics, he's pretty badass actually.
I think so too, because when it comes to Aquaman, and which is funny, is because he's always had this battle of popularity with Namor, because it's like Namor. I think that's just a thing of, I guess, how the DC and Marvel have built each one up, because Marvel built up Namor as this renegade, as this guy that was like, okay, I can do what I want. Like, one thing that really stuck out that Marvel did that I thought DC should do with Aquaman is, I think he got into an argument with Magneto, and he asks like, "Why aren't you bothered?" And he just turns back at Magneto like, "Why would I?" And it's like that's what Aquaman should be about. Just somebody that just was like, "I don't care. You're strong. So what? Yeah. I'm still gonna beat you." So.
Well, that's one thing that I like about Jeff Johns' New 52 run is Aquaman was kind of aware of his public perception. Like, he went to, I think it was in the first volume, I forget which issue it was, but, like, he went into the seafood restaurant and ordered, like, I think salmon or something. And the person sitting behind him was like, "What? You can't eat fish?" And he's like, "Well, what are you talking about? Why not?" And he's like, "Because they're, like, your friends. You talk to them." And he's like, I don't talk to fish. I send telepathic, like, messages. He basically was like, whatever, sure, why not? So in a way, I kind of hope that like the movie kind of like is self-aware, but not to the point of like something like Deadpool or breaks the fourth wall aware. But like at some point in the Aquaman movie, someone's kind of like, "Aren't you the guy that like talks to fish or whatever?" And he's just kind of like, "Yeah, okay, you say that like it's a dumb thing." But I could summon sharks from the depths of the ocean, or like giant squid. Because again, that's the thing. Like when I bring up, it's like, yeah, Aquaman's really cool, and they're like, "Oh, he talks to fish." And they're like, okay, you realize that the planet is covered in about 75% ocean and water. That's his domain. So theoretically, he controls about 75% of the world and all of its inhabitants. So yeah, what a lame-o that guy.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that's one thing, and it goes back to like what we were talking about earlier. Like Aquaman is a very underrated as far as like, and as far as character development and what he can do. I think that's why they picked Jason Momoa, because he definitely can bring that seriousness that he did in Conan, but that joking attitude that he's done in many comedy comedy movies. Like he got comedic timing.
Oh yeah,
but at the same time, we've all know, like, when he gets serious in warrior mode, it's like, it's a wrap. Like, so he's a good blend, and that's why I'm personally rooting for him in the Aquaman movie, because I know there's a lot right on Aquaman, because I think they're on their last legs now as far as like comic book characters, because you got Wonder Woman, you got Flash, you got, which probably, who knows who's gonna get, when he's gonna get a movie, you got Flash, you got
maybe
Cyborg, who's probably never going to get a movie. So Aquaman and Wonder Woman is pretty much the only people you can go on.
Yeah. And again, that's kind of the weird point we're at in DC, where it's kind of like, okay, Wonder Woman, great. Do we still know who's going to play Batman, Superman? Nope. Okay, who else do we have? Aquaman. Okay, cool. Is Flash still happening? Maybe. Okay, what else do we have going on? I don't know. It's like, okay, well, let's just keep pushing forward. We've got Aquaman for sure, Wonder Woman for sure. Everything else is up in the air. So it's a weird point in comics right now where DC are relying on Wonder Woman, Which again, I'm more than happy that Wonder Woman turned out as great as it was, and I love the fact that they're already going forward with a sequel. But me being a fan of Man of Steel, I'm kind of like, it's been 5 years, guys. Come on, give us Man of Steel too. Or cast someone as Batman finally, please, because we all know that Ben Affleck is out. That's kind of the worst kept secret in Hollywood. So, yeah, like let's get focused finally, Warner Brothers, because again, you have some of the greatest superheroes in all of comic books. Utilize them and actually tell really good stories. Don't rush it like you have been doing, and tell really good stories. And then you can build slowly like Marvel did, and people will come see your movies and they'll start making billions of dollars like Marvel have been doing.
And I think that's what's weird about DC and Marvel. Like, the fact that, honestly, and I told somebody this the other day, I think it was Cade or Dark Monitor, but I was like, honestly, this movie, I guess War, as we call it, should be like dead heat, because MCU built their characters up with almost none of their rights up to the more popular characters.
B and C-list characters.
Warner Brothers got the rights to everyone DC character.
Yeah.
So your universe should be way much bigger than the MCU, but somehow the MCU looks a lot bigger. And now that you pretty much got the Fantastic Four and the X-Men, you're good. You pretty much just made their universe so much larger.
Yeah.
And you guys then all of a sudden created 3 different cinematic universes with technically your own characters. So it's such a weird time to be a comic book fan.
Yeah, because again, like, we've got 2 Guardians of the Galaxy movies, 2 Ant-Man movies, a Doctor Strange movie, and for some reason people it's kind of like, how do we do a Superman 2? What do we do for Batman? It's like, what? It's like, you've got like 60 years of comic book material you can mine from, and you haven't cracked the code on a Superman 2 or a Batman story? What is going on? Am I taking crazy pills here? What's the problem? And again, like, it's not me just bashing Warner Brothers because I hate the DCU or anything. It's just, I'm so frustrated as a fan that, again, Marvel, we've got 2 movies on Guardians of the Galaxy. No one had heard of them. Yet Superman, Batman, Flash, Warner Brothers are kind of like, how do we do good movies on these characters? It's like, I don't know, read a comic book.
Right, I agree. And I think it's funny because, and they're kind of killing their own self, because it's like, okay, how do we do a live action part 2 of Man of Steel? Mm-hmm. But while we're thinking about that, let's make Death of Superman and Reign of Superman in the meantime while we figure out who's going to be Superman again. Yeah. Because it's like the animated movies have been like their plan B, which is good, but a weird plan B, because it shouldn't be your plan B. And I think this is like common knowledge, like I said earlier, that's where they put the most emphasis, because the best material seems to go to them, which is kind of a bad thing, because it's like,
it really
if
is.
you had that energy going to Batman and Superman, they probably have like 3 movies by now.
Well, I mean, even in Batman versus Superman, you had like 5 good comic storylines in one movie. It's like, now if they had split those into like separate movies, we'd be good. Yeah. But again, I think DC was just seeing those Marvel numbers where they're making like billions of dollars, and like, we need to make billions of dollars. Okay, screw a Man of Steel direct sequel, add Batman in there, and then they team up, add Wonder Woman, Death of Superman, all these comic storylines, add them all into one. Fans will love that because they're a bunch of stupid nerds. And again, some of us nerds loved it, and by all means, hats off to you for liking it. But others were like, ooh, no, I don't like 5 different comic book stories shoved into one. It just doesn't work.
And that's what it was. That was definitely Batman versus Superman's issue. And I think that was DC's issue as a whole, because they knew from a live action sense, they tried too hard. It was kind of like the reverse effect of what Marvel was doing with DC, which is kind of weird. And like Marvel saw how great Rebirth is doing.
Yeah.
So they tried to say like, let's reboot and let's do this. As in the movie sense, DC saw how what Marvel was doing and was like, okay, we gotta scramble and do something. Let's make this clash between Batman, Superman, the most epic. We're gonna throw in Doomsday for good measure. Like, okay, like slow down.
Yeah.
Calm down, take a breath.
And then, like, Zack Snyder on one of his social media was kind of like, that's not the real Doomsday. And it's kind of like, yeah, I don't think anyone knows what's going on in DC. Like, I feel like if you ask one studio executive, they're kind of like, I don't know what's going on. And then someone else would be like, I've got the full plan laid out. So it's like, I don't think anyone really has a for sure plan. It just seems like it's kind of like they're throwing darts at a dartboard. It's kind of like, okay, Man of Steel 2. Now we landed on Birds of Prey. Make Birds of Prey happen. It's like, okay, next up, who's throwing the dart? And then they throw a dart at the dartboard, and it's kind of like, okay, new Batman movie with Shazam. Again, we're getting Shazam movie before we're getting a Man of Steel 2. What the hell? Again,
but I think Shazam should have been gotten a comic book movie if you think about it, because he's
been around for almost as long as Superman.
Yeah, he came out, I want to say like maybe a year after Superman debuted, or like a couple months, because he's pretty much like he's more intertwined with Superman's legacy, not even from a comic book sense, but from a publication sense, because of the history between DC and I forgot the publication that was in charge of Captain. I'm about to call him Captain Marvel.
I think it was Fawcett Comics was.
Yep, that's who it is. And it's like the fact that Shazam is finally getting one. It's like we should have got a Superman too, but hey, Shazam.
Yeah.
So
it's like he's basically Superman. Why not?
Right. Well, you would do. But I think that, and I believe that once they finally figure out who's the next Superman is going to be, that's when they probably going to say, okay, let's put a heavy effort into this. Let's do him the right way.
Yeah.
Because I think that's also what they're scared of, is because it's so, in a way, it's so easy to mess up a Superman movie because, let's face it, out of the many times he's been portrayed, you can probably count on maybe one hand he's actually been done right, not counting the animated series. You got Christopher Reeve, you got Smallville. You can probably throw Brandon Routh's run maybe in there.
I really liked him as Superman. It just wasn't the best movie.
Right. And I think that's the main thing, that, he was a good Superman. He wasn't acceptable.
Yeah.
And then Henry Cavill, his Man of Steel run, you probably can throw Welling, Reeve, and Cavill in there and be like, okay, those are the ones that really solidify Superman. And then every other iteration, not Tim Daly or Jerry O'Connell, as their animated ones, is like, that's our Superman. So they're scared to mess it up this time because they see the backlash of when you mess up Superman.
Yes,
pretty much.
but here's the thing though, is regardless of how bad a Superman or Batman the movie are, because we've had a lot of bad of both, they'll still keep making Batman and Superman movies regardless. However, I guarantee if Wonder Woman had failed, like if for whatever reason the movie didn't do well financially, or if like it did okay financially and people just didn't respond to it, they would have, like, studio executives would have been like, oh, I guess no one wants to see a Wonder Woman movie. It's like, no, you dumbasses, it's just you screwed up the movie. Same thing with like Aquaman or Flash or any of the other characters. Like if there's any other character aside from Batman and Superman, like if they did, like, again, if this was 15 years ago, they did a Flash movie, didn't do that well, then they would have been like, I guess no one likes the Flash. It's like, look at your comic book sales. It will prove otherwise. You're just not writing the character right. You're just not executing the premise or like the story right. But again, thankfully we got a great Wonder Woman movie. But yeah, like they can, because again, like Batman and Robin, awful movie. It might be fun in kind of a so bad it's fun way. That's how I like it anyways. Like it's so bad it's fun to watch. But again, that movie, like, no one really liked that movie. Yet, not even 10 years later, we got the Dark Knight trilogy. Thankfully, we did, because that kind of brought Batman back to, like, okay, yeah, he's a serious character. We can take him seriously. He's not a jokey, campy character like in Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. But in the first two Superman movies, really good. Superman 3 and 4, not so good. And then even Superman Returns with Brandon Routh. He was a good Superman. The movie itself, not so good. Not even 10 years later, we get a new Superman movie. So, and again, I think that's the problem too, is up until now, Warner Brothers have not been willing to take risks on these other characters. So hopefully they'll finally find a good balance of like taking enough risks, but also still developing their characters well, to where, let's say that like the Flash movie gets released. Maybe it doesn't do super great financially, but people like it enough to where they're like, okay, let's try another Flash movie, see where that goes, and then the next Flash movie does even better because people are like, oh hey, I really like Ezra Miller as Flash, or the movie was really fun or something. Because really, Warner Brothers have always been super reactionary to where, again, with all their movies, especially most recent with their DCEU, like half the people didn't like Batman vs Superman, so they're like, course correct, make Justice League more fun, make it less lighthearted, or make it more lighthearted and fun. So I don't know. It's kind of one of those things where I think they just need to finally have a solid plan, nail out the details, figure out their tone. But again, they can change it up depending on the movie, because Shazam looks more fun, lighthearted, that's totally fine, fits with the character. Have Batman be your more dark, brooding character. So I think that's the thing they need to do, is like figure out like, okay, what's our overall tone for our movies, but let's deviate depending on which character we're making a movie about. Like Suicide Squad. Like if they wanted to do like a rated R Suicide Squad movie, I think that would be fitting. It would be fine. But like a rated R Superman movie, it's like, no, this doesn't fit. But anyways, since we're going on almost an hour and a half, I say we can start wrapping this up. So, are there anything else you want to talk about real quick, or anything you want to promote before we start wrapping this up?
Oh man, for anybody I got a few recommendations that people should be reading right now that's going on. If anybody don't know, the Wolverine is back, so go ahead and cop that, because Wolverine's officially back. The Fantastic Four is back. One comic book that I recommend people read that is starting to get good is Death of Inhuman storyline. Like everybody should. That's one comic book that I recommend people go look at. And as far as indies goes, Unnatural is like, I've been telling a lot of people about this indie comic. It's very good if you like drama and crime series. But if you want to get to know me, if anybody's out there want to get a hold of me, you can first of all download the app Amino and just go to Comics Amino. You'll find people like myself, Dark Monitor. Shout out to this gentleman that interviewed me, Irishman Jake.
I hate that
AKA
guy.
the greatest Irishman since what? Cassidy.
That is far too great of a compliment.
Pretty much, you just mingle with us anytime. We're great. We're all great. You probably will laugh your butt off too, because I do countdowns and I'm pretty much a riot.
Yeah. Like
what you want to get?
Capo is one of the few people where I'd trust to make a grocery list for myself.
Right.
just based off of your list that you create, I'd be like, I trust that guy to create a grocery list for myself.
Right. Or YouTube. If YouTube, King TJ15. If anybody want to get a hold of me, I usually do movie reviews for comic book movies. I'm working on one for Deadpool 2. I had saw it like 3 times. I just never got around to it. I said I was going to start doing that more with comic book movies, just to help like get my personal take, because there's not a lot of reviews on there like that. So I said I was going to start doing that more. For anybody that's interested, just subscribe to my page and you would definitely get a lot of comic book movies. My first one is Avengers Infinity War, and I'm going to do one about Deadpool. The next one is probably going to be Venom. So look out for that one, because that's going to be a movie that definitely you probably want to know if it's good or not. So I'm going to definitely be honest about that.
I'll be sure to leave a link to your channel below. And do you have any blogs you're working on? You wanna tease people with or promote?
Oh, well, let's see. I got one. I got three in the making. One
Ooh.
is the best indie comic book movie. So pretty much the best movies that pretty much is not Marvel or DC.
There are a lot of really
There's
good ones.
there's another one. Yeah, that one took me a while. I think I got a total of like 15. So it's pretty much my longest list
Yeah.
yet. Thanks, because yeah, Jake had a lot to do with that.
Again,
So yeah, my
it's one of
honorable.
those things where, like, when you're thinking of indie comic movies, you're kind of like, oh wait, that one's indie too, and then there's that one, and then there's this one, and then you're kind of like, wow, there really are a lot of good ones. There's also a lot of bad ones, but thankfully, I feel like the good outweigh the bad with
Yeah,
indie
yeah,
comics.
that is
So
true. And I also, and this is one I got, and another one is best villains from Image Comics, because we're currently doing an Image dedication month
oh yeah,
on Comics Amino. So I'm working on the best Image, because honestly, they've been having a hell of a year in Image Comics. So they probably, if I was to do an awards for best indie comics, they probably win, because they've been putting out a lot of hits. I mean, they kind of kicked it off with Invincible, which ended their series, and they kind of gave it the taste like, okay, this is the kind of year we're having.
yeah,
And the last but not least, I started doing this not too long ago, but I usually start doing mirror matches. So it's kind of like a debate with myself, where I see 2 points of view. And this month or October is gonna be pretty much me discussing the diversity era of comic books.
okay,
Pretty much, because it's a topic that I've always wanted to talk about. Being an African American, but I definitely also see both sides of the coin on
Yeah.
the pros and cons. So it's definitely something I've always wanted to talk about. So look out for those three coming in from now until about Halloween.
awesome. And again, if you all need anyone to create lists for you, I would recommend Capo to create lists. Because again, he seems to have a really good grasp on list making. So whether it be like you need good recommendations on comics, comic book movies, or again, maybe you just kind of want someone to make a grocery list for you. Oh, I trust this guy. Maybe he can recommend some things to your diet that you don't normally eat, and then you'll be like, man, that's really healthy. I feel better now.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I don't really have anything. Actually, the one thing blog wise that I do have coming up is a new trade paperback showcase, because I've recently purchased some new comics. So I'll be showcasing those. There are 3 of which that are indie, or actually all of them are indie. 3 of which are Image comics, because this month is all Image related for
See?
the Indie AF
See,
group.
told you. Image,
And
man.
yeah, Indie Image is probably my favorite indie comic company. Then I've got one that is Dark Horse, but again, you'll see that. And I guess for those of you who are, again, since my beard seems to be something that interests you, you'll see the status of my beard as well in the most recent trade paperback showcase. And then if anyone who has Twitter and is interested, you can follow me on Twitter, DirishmanJake. Pretty much the same thing on all social media platforms. And I think that pretty much wraps up this video. So thank you again to Capo Jones for joining me for this video. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
No problem.
Thank you. Finally, I got my interview.
Yeah, and if for whatever reason you are not following him, follow him on Comics Amino. Check out his YouTube channel, and continue keeping up with the Indie AF group. We've got a lot of things planned. So until next time, everyone, cheers.